I want to talk a little bit about Sir Isaac Newton. You know, the ancient Greeks knew about prisms, what happens if you put a prism in the light, in the sunlight, and you know, they played with them and they noticed that colored light comes out, you know, comes out of the prism. They realized that. But it took Newton to figure out that when this happens, it's because the prism disassembles the light. It unmixes it. And that's what the colors are. Newton was smart. He's famous for being smart. And he's probably most known, you see cartoons sometimes, you know, of an apple falling and hitting Newton on the head at the moment of his insight into the nature of gravitation. Now I found out that that the day that happened, the moon was in the sky. So, and not that I've researched this, but here's the way I think it happened. It was probably about 4 days after the full moon, because at a time like that, the moon, even though it doesn't really look full anymore, it's still big and very easy to see, and before it sets in the western sky, which will be, you know, could easily be like 10 o'clock in the morning, and that would be a good time if I were going to make a, you know, a great, you know, insight. That would be a nice time of the day to do it. So I'm guessing this happened in the morning and around 4 days or so after a full moon, and probably Newton was out in his garden, and he knew that there were apple trees in that garden. And I think the chances are very good that he didn't even see the apple fall, but he was looking at the moon and contemplating, you know, why it hangs in the sky like it does. See, everybody was familiar with gravity, or what we call, you know, everyday ordinary gravity. Or the rain falls, or if I drop something, it falls, or there's weight. I can feel the pressure against my feet, you know, and the ground. If you fall from any height, you know, you might hurt yourself. Everybody was familiar with gravity. And everyone had seen the great heavenly bodies floating around in the sky. But to connect those two things, that's not trivial. That's a brilliant insight to suppose that it's the same laws of nature that are functioning in both cases. So that really, you see, was the, you know, what he should get paid for. And proving it's another matter. You know, it's corroboration that convinces, and as corroboration accumulates, it doesn't become, you know, what it's corroborating doesn't become more and more true. You're just more and more stuck with it. So what's of interest to us is just that flash of being able to entertain the idea at all. That's what's of interest. And shortly here I'm going to try my best to communicate to you an idea that if I should ever get paid as a philosopher, it'll be for this idea. And I have found it wonderfully difficult to communicate, but I'm going to just, you know, give it a shot here today, and Either you'll get it or you won't. I think now it's time for the rainbow. I want to try and do a little bit of a demonstration and then explain how does a rainbow works. Okay, I've got something set up here. Okay, this is our sun, this old slide projector. This is our raindrop. It's a glass ball. Now, what's important is that it's spherical. Most raindrops, 95% of all raindrops, that's how they distribute according to size. They're mostly about 1 millimeter in diameter, and that's about the size of the ball in the end of your ballpoint pen. And as they fall, they do grow. Some of them grow and they get bigger, and then they flatten out kind of like a hamburger bun, and then they get like a hat, and then they get, as they grow, then they get like a parachute, and then once they form into a full parachute, then they break up and become little ones again. But at any given time, about 95% of them are 1 millimeter in diameter, and roughly, and this means that they're wonderfully spherical. They're perfect spheres. The surface tension of a small thing like that is very great compared to the forces necessary to sphericalize it. You know what it's like when you're playing with bubbles, soap bubbles. If you get a soap bubble that's, say, 4 inches in diameter, it becomes very squishy. It'll wobble like that. And one that's very big, a very big one doesn't. It kind of gives up on being a sphere. But the ones that are very small, the little droplets like this, bubbles that size, you can tell they're just tight and perfectly spherical. No shaking, no wobbling. So similar forces, similar balancing of forces is going to be happening with the raindrops. So I did try this with small glass marbles, but I could not see color, and even in this case it's not very good. So what happens is the sun shines on all these raindrops, and each raindrop has its own private rainbow coming out the back toward the sun. This is the way you see a rainbow. You see a rainbow in a circle with your head, the shadow of your head in the center of the circle. That's why you always see rainbows when the sun is low in the sky, early in the morning or just before sunset. That's when the sun is low enough to let you see it. So the shadow of your head, is going to make a usable circle. Because that angle will always be the same. I don't know what it is, but some people do, I'm sure. Now, there's a cone of light that comes back toward the sun from each raindrop, and it's going to be, here I can just see it's a bit red on the outside. This is how a rainbow is. Red on the outside, blue on the inside. It's a cone of light. The center of the cone is the center of the raindrop. And they're all these raindrops have the same orientation. They all have their private rainbow as they fall, and the rainbow is just as stable as the raindrop itself, which is actually wonderfully stable. Okay, I'm going to turn this off. So what's going on when a rainbow is visible is that there's millions of rainbows, one per raindrop. They're all exactly the same, They all have exactly the same orientation. That's to say, they're all pointing, there's a cone of colored light, red on the outside, blue on the inside. It has the same geometry, the same shape as the cone of light that you seem to be able to see. Well, you do see it. The illusion is that there's an object, a big colored object in the sky. That's not the case. What's going on is there's rainbows everywhere. Every place that the sun hits a raindrop. And what allows the experience of what we call a rainbow to occur is the point of view property that we use to look at something. We have an eye. It's very much like a camera, like a pinhole camera. The only light that you see is the light that comes into your eye. And the only light that's, say, red, when you see the red in a rainbow, what's the same about it is the angle. Since all those millions of individual rainbows are all pointing exactly the same direction, then it turns out that that's your eye geometrically harvests just that band of red. That's because that's the only red that comes to your eye. Because there's another cone, the center of which is your eye, and it goes the opposite direction. It goes the same direction, it opens up the same direction as the sunlight is shining. Whereas all the individual tiny little rainbows that, one per raindrop, those are all opening up back toward the sun. So they're pointing in opposite directions. But what we experience as a rainbow, it's an artifact. It's an illusion that is due to geometry. I mean, I like rainbows, but it's an illusion that there is this colored object in the sky. It isn't so. And I want to talk about another illusion. I want to talk about how our consciousness works in general, particularly when we're awake. This is the most useful form of consciousness that we are aware of, the waking state of consciousness. I sort of got an assignment to think about this many years ago, and between the assignment, that's to say, I got the assignment from someone I couldn't see. But it took me about most of 2 years before I understood what it was I was meant to complete the assignment. The way this assignment came was it just came into my mind that what we call experience, and by that I don't mean past experience, like you have a lot of experience driving a car. That's not what I mean. I'm talking about here and now experience. That when you experience something, this pencil, for example, if there is a pencil, it has rubber on it, it's made of cedar, probably it's got, graphite and clay on the inside. It's got yellow paint on the outside. At least it's got paint on it. Anyway, and brass, at the end, holds the eraser on. Anyway, that's the objective component as it's just a sample, right, of what we call experience. And besides that, there's an inner subjective aspect to it. Now, Everybody knows this. But what's the connection between these two things? I think I'll mention too that when this assignment came to me, along with the raw assignment was this intense urgency. And I had no reason, I didn't put that there. I didn't put the idea there either. But by this point, someone must have thought that I should have the assignment, or they wouldn't have given it to me. But it took me a couple years to figure out the connection. And it turns out that the connection has to do with recognition. So let's talk about the brain a little bit and what recognition is in general and how it works. And let's just focus on, just to simplify things, let's just talk about visual experience, visual perception, visual recognition. Even though, of course, we know we have more than one sense. We have, hearing and smell and so on, touch. And the recognitions, it all works basically the same thing, but let's just, to simplify this discussion, talk about visual experience. Now when you have, the first thing that happens when you let's say look at a pencil, the first thing that happens is that there's a visual workup. This is in the back of the brain. It's called the percept, and it's not experienced. It's just a raw workup. I think it's hi-fi, but it doesn't have meaning. And it's what happens after that gets connected to what's in the front of the brain, in the frontal cortex here. That's where the cognitive categories are. And up there you've got, we all of us that have ever seen a pencil or have used a pencil, there's one labeled pencil. And we know quite a bit about pencils because most of us, had quite a bit of experience with them. So, and that all comes along. When you recognize something as a pencil, then even though you don't think about it, it carries with it all of that stuff in seed form. It's as though what happens is, the production of the percept in the back of the brain, it's like hitting a tuning fork, or it's like strumming the strings on a sitar that the fingers touch, and underneath them there are sympathetic strings. Now the sympathetic strings are what's in the frontal area, and the touch strings are like the percept. And that, it's as though it sounds, and then it shakes loose what it can, whatever will shake loose that's up here. And ordinarily, there's lots and lots of things. Our normal, everyday experience is basically, it's like a snowstorm of recognitions. As we walk around in the world, we kind of, in general, we kind of know where we are. I know I'm on concrete. I know that's glass. I know that this is, even though it looks like wood, it's probably not wood. It's some built, siding assembled out of, resin and sawdust or something. We know a great deal about our surroundings, and it's like a mosaic of recognitions all day, every day, and we take it for granted. But it's happening. There's a lot happening. Just like, when we eat, we put food in our mouth and we chew it and swallow it, and we don't know how it gets digested, but we know we can do it. We know it's nice, to eat a good meal. We do it. We walk around. We don't know how we walk around, but we do it. You can tell, when a sweat bee comes and flies close to you here, hovering like this, he doesn't know how he can fly any more than we know how he can walk. But he knows he can do it. And he does. He does it too, just by intention, just the same way we do. When you want your hand to come up, it comes up. We don't know how that happens, but it does happen. So, all the creatures are the same. We're all the same. We all conduct our bodies about, by mere intention. Fairly magical, but we do it. We take it for granted every day. And we don't know how we see things. You were able to perceive things just as clearly before, anybody ever told you anything about how it works as after. Someone can study for 25 years if they want how we digest our food or how we walk, but it doesn't help them digest their food any better or how to walk any better, even though they know lots more. So I don't mean to disparage that. Everything's interesting like that, but the reason I'm bothering to talk to you about perception it's not meant to be academic. It's meant to be have import. Or I wouldn't be here wasting your time and my time. But first, see, if you can understand this, if you can just entertain this thought that I'm hoping to conclude here with, more or less conclude, I'll be happy about it. It'll be, because I think this idea is harder to entertain, to see for the first time than, for example, Newton's insight as to the nature of gravitation. It's a harder idea than that. So, when we recognize things, it's not just details. It's not simply that I recognize that as concrete, and maybe I'm guessing that the black stones in there are basalt, or this is a pencil, this is cloth. It's not all details. Recognition also occurs on a holistic level. Like when you go to a movie, people work hard now, and are good at it, that make movies, at making them seem real. So that when you go and sit in the theater, or even at home, and you watch the movie, you experience it as reality during the time of the movie. And of course that varies from one movie to another, but this is not a rare occurrence. That during the time that it's on, it's real. Even if you go to a play, even if the play if they're using minimal props, almost no props, still they manage to, through their art and through the willingness of the audience to make that leap, you experience that the content of the play as reality. So that's what I mean by holistic recognition. And of course, in the case of a play or a movie, it's a misrecognition, because it's not reality. But you experience it as reality anyway for the time being.